So Mike, you have this book coming out and you've been kind of quiet about it. What is your book about? Well, it's about $14. No? Fine. Hi, I'm Mike Siegel. I'm an astrophysicist. I write for Ordinary Times and I occasionally write books, and this is The Throughput. I mentioned this a couple of months ago. Back in 2016, I wrote my first novel. It was a project that took me many years, just writing whenever I've had time in the middle of the night. And finally, just pushed myself through and got it finished. And I self-published it on Amazon's Kindle Direct Publishing because I didn't really think there was much of a market for it. It's kind of literary science fiction, and I, thought it was good, but, wasn't going to be a huge thing. But I got a lot of really nice comments on it, and a lot of people saying, you really should get this edited and try to sell it to a publisher or something like that. So I did do the first part. I actually hired an editor to go through it and give me comments. And so what I hold in my hot little hands here is the second edition. There's no major changes. I've just sort of sped a lot of things up, cut a bit of superfluous stuff, trimmed back some of the overwriting that I have a tendency to do. And I think that having read through it a second time, it is a significant improvement. But because it's already been published on Kindle, it's kind of hard to market. So I'm just going ahead and going with their print-on-demand version. And so this is the author copy. It is actually by me. The not for resale covers my name on this in this edition. But if you buy it, get it, it will have my name. And it's got my name on the inside. It is strange to actually hold it. Even though, no publishing company threw a trainload of money at me to publish it, to actually hold a completed novel in your hands is quite something. The comments that I've gotten, the good reviews I've gotten, have persuaded me that this is a book to be proud of, and I'm hoping that some of you will buy it and enjoy it. This is something I probably couldn't say if I had a real publisher, but I don't think Amazon's going to care. If you read it and you really like it, feel free to share it with someone you think might like it. I only get a couple bucks off the sale of this. Most of this goes towards the publication costs. So you're not really taking any skin off my nose if you share it. Like most authors, I just want to be read. I want people to enjoy it. I want people to tell me that it moved them or that it inspired them or something like that. So it is coming out on July 7th. That is about a week away from when I'm recording this. I'm going to put this up probably on July 5th going in, or maybe on the day to sort of wet the thing. And once it's available for publication, I can't set it to pre-order because it was previously published. But once it comes out and you can buy it, then I'll do a few more videos talking about some of the scientific aspects of the book and where I came down on those, how I worked through those ideas, and why I went through with the scientific ideas I went with. But for today's video, I'm going to talk more about the book generally, about the plot and about the inspiration. So the plot of The Water Lily Pond goeth thusly. It's set in the future when society has been transformed by an invention called the daily. The daily is a pill. At first, it was just a way of taking all people's medications, the 17 pills they might take during the day, compressing it into one pill that they could take in the morning, and then they were done with taking pills for the rest of the day. But eventually someone invented and added to it an anti-agathic, something that stopped the aging process and eventually reversed it. And so aging basically doesn't happen anymore. Everyone is, fit and healthy for as long as they can live. However, the main character, Walter Winston, a world famous and accomplished painter, at 128 years old, finds himself dying of a new condition called Methuselah's condition, which is where people just begin to slowly fade away. Either their body or their mind is tired of life, and they find themselves just going. And so a lot of it is about how he lived through this and the changes he has seen the daily work on society and how it has changed his perspective and so on. But he decides to go on a journey across the country to revisit the places he's lived, to think about the things he has experienced, to meet the few people who are still alive that he remembers from his life, and to basically have a retrospective on his life, on whether it was well lived and whether and the things he did and the things he accomplished. And I won't spoil where it goes. It's much of it was a surprise to me, actually, when I wrote the book. One of the times when a character spoke to me, and I was willing to follow his voice. But that's the basic plot. The name The Water Lily Pond comes from the fact that this man is an artist, and one of the inspirations for me and for him came from Claude Monet's Water Lily Pond paintings. That brings me to the second part of this. One of the questions that writers tend to hate is, where do you get your ideas from? Because it's a really tricky question to answer. Dave Barry used to joke that he belonged to an idea service, and he would send them $10 a month, and they would send him ideas for his columns. And he said, for $20 a month, I could get good ideas, but I'm a cheapskate. But it's sometimes hard to know. Writing is a lot like many other things. You learn by doing, and the more you write, the more inspiration you find. Sometimes you're driving down the road and an idea comes to you. Sometimes you're in the shower. Sometimes you're writing and an idea comes to you as you're writing. And they just, I understood the process that unlocks that part of the brain that just throws out, hey, wouldn't it be cool if you did this? The only thing I have learned about it is that when the muse shows up, write it down right away, because you will forget it. And so my phone is filled with all kinds of notes about various stories that I want to write and so forth. And hopefully one day I'll get around to writing them. I do know a couple of the specific inspirations that came for this. One of them was when I lived in Texas. I was building a retaining wall for the house we own there. And being me, I built it, with stone in the front and then steel reinforced concrete behind so that it would last. And I thought to myself, wouldn't it be cool to come back here decades later and see if this wall was still here, if it had stood the test of time? And so that was part of the inspiration. It shows up a little bit in some scenes, but it's more of the feel of coming back to things decades later and looking at the accomplishments that you've had. But the main inspiration actually came from this book. Louis Grizzard's They Tore Out My Heart and Stomped That Sucker Flat. Grizzard was a sports editor, grew up in Georgia, moved to Chicago. When he came back to Atlanta, became a columnist, an opinion columnist for the journal Constitution, and became very popular and beloved. And this is about his heart surgery. He had a valve defect that he had to have worked on, and this was eventually what killed him at a relatively young age. And this is, a story that he wrote while he was undergoing heart surgery and very, very much facing down the possibility that he could die. So it has a lot of introspection in it. And it's also very funny because he was a very funny man. And there's a story he tells in here that has haunted me for a long time. Grizzard grew up in a rural town, a small town in rural Georgia, and his mother was a school teacher. And his mother had a student in her class named Sammy, who was part of this very poor, disreputable family. But after class, he would always come up and give Louis's mother a huge hug. And so she was very fond of him. And so because he had used a not very polite term to refer to the family, his mother made him come with her when she did a teacher visit to his family. And he describes the scene very vividly, that it was, a rundown house. There were car seats being used as couches. There were various dogs running around, children of unknown disposition. The people they were meeting with were actually Sammy's grandparents, because his mother had run off with someone and she didn't know who the father was and all this stuff. And she met with the grandfather and said, he's a really good student, but he won't talk sometimes. And the grandfather took a belt off the wall and said, well, if you want him to talk, you pop him with this. And if you want him to shut up, you pop him again. And she didn't respond very well to that. But as she was leaving, he ran up to the car and gave her another big hug, almost like he needed her to take him away from this. And then that night he talks about how he could hear his mother crying in her bedroom about him. And then one day the family up and disappeared, like poor itinerant families have done forever. Then, a few months later, it was a, cold winter night. Even in Georgia, it gets cold. And they were up and they were listening to the wind howling, and his mother just out of the blue said, I wonder if Sammy is warm tonight. And then that night he could hear her crying again in his bedroom. And that story hit me, and it haunted me, the idea of a child who was very bright and had all that potential. And I read this when I was a teenager, who was very bright and had all that potential, and just didn't have the environment that could make him thrive, didn't have guardians who cared. It didn't have the resources, didn't have the environment. And as I've gotten older and have been in education, I have seen that story replicated in many, many places of people who, as 10-year-old children, 8-year-old children, are bright and have that potential and, just never fulfill it because they just don't have the right environment. They don't have the right guardians. They don't have someone looking out for them and lifting them up. And so you'll discover, if you read the book, what Walter's circumstances were growing up and what he overcame and how he overcame them and the people who helped him. But that was probably the biggest point of inspiration for this. There is nothing greater lost in our society than human potential. People who have the possibility of being great scientists or great writers or great artists and never get the chance to because they just never have the right circumstances or something bad happens to them. J.R. Tolkien wrote about how when he was a young man, by the time he was an adult, almost all his friends had died in World War I. And you think about that, that means Tolkien himself, who fought in the war, a bullet goes one way, a shell goes another way, he dies, Middle-earth is never created, the entire genre of fantasy either doesn't exist or is very different from what we have today. There's a whole change in the artistic perspective. And then you turn that around, you think about, well, a lot of people did die in that war. What did we lose? What great worlds or great works did we lose? And so that's a thought that occurs to me quite a bit of what great works did we lose and what great works could we have if we were able to save people from bad circumstances. And, I'm not trying to get political or anything here. How you think you lift people up with bad circumstances, discuss that amongst yourselves. I have my own opinions I'm not going to express here, but it is a very real phenomenon that so much human potential is lost because people never get the chance. And so that was the obsessive thought that informed much of what is written in this book. And I hope that's a theme that comes across quite well as you read it. So that's the story of Water Lily Pond. That is the inspiration. It was fun to read it again. And when you write things, often you're a little too close to them to react emotionally. Like if I write something funny, I'm not going to laugh because I came up with the joke. And so, that's sometimes hard to judge whether something's going to be funny or not because I'm not going to laugh at it. Or if something, I write is very moving or something is very entertaining or something makes people think, that's hard for me to judge because I'm close to it. And so I'm not looking at it from another person's brain and being able to see what this does to them. But I actually, as I read this, did find there were a couple of points where I did enjoy it and thought it was, I was like, man, I wrote that. That's not bad writing. And so I'm hoping you'll agree. So available as of Sunday, July 7th at Amazon.com, print on demand. I've set the price kind of about as low as I can to sort of boost sales, but and it's available right now actually as the ebook. That is the updated version. So if you want to download it right now, knock yourself out. But for my part, I like holding books. As much as I am into streaming and computers and all this stuff, when I read a book, I like to read an actual book and stick my nose in the actual book and read it. So I'm hoping that this will encourage more people to buy the book and read it, because it's been my kind of experience that as wonderful as digital books are, a lot of people buy them and then never read them. That's also true of print books. I have a whole shelf back there full of unread books, but people are more likely to read a book when they have an actual physical thing in their house. So I hope you'll buy it. I hope you'll enjoy it. If you do, please spread the word, because we're relying entirely on word of mouth. I don't have a publishing house behind me or anything like that to stir up publicity for this. So I'm entirely relying on word of mouth if people want to read this. And again, it's really not about, I'm not hurting for money or anything like that. It's really about authors want to be read, and I want to hear that people enjoyed the book. So if you didn't enjoy the book, then keep that to yourself, because I don't want to hear that. I'm just joking. But that's this edition of The Throughput. We'll be back, as I said, a couple times discussing scientific aspects of the book, and then we'll be back to our regularly scheduled programming of talking about movies, and hopefully I'll finally get that music video edited and a whole bunch of other stuff. So until we meet again, I'm Mike Siegel. I write for Ordinary Times, and hey, I also write books. Thank you for watching.